It was the kind of Christmas that should have felt ordinary, but somehow turned out to be the most extraordinary day of my life. It all started with the tiniest, most insignificant detail, a slight change in the usual plans. Normally, Liza and I would spend the evening with my family, but this year, it was different. She insisted that we host Christmas dinner at our place instead, and for some reason, I didn't ask why. Maybe I was too tired from work. Maybe I wanted to avoid the stress of traveling. Either way, I let her have it her way. The house was quiet when I woke up that morning. I'd already done my fair share of the preparations earlier in the week, so I was looking forward to just sitting back and enjoying the day. Liza was in and out of the kitchen, organizing last-minute things, barely speaking to me. When she did, it was in short bursts, as if she were trying to get something out of the way. I didn't think much of it at the time. She had always been a bit anxious when it came to hosting, but there was a different vibe today, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Around noon, the doorbell rang, and I went to answer it. Standing at the door was not just Liza's parents, not just her brother like usual, but an unfamiliar face. A tall man, wearing a gray coat and a pair of glasses that looked just a bit too polished for someone casually coming over for a holiday dinner. He didn't even introduce himself at first, just gave me a polite smile, and then, in an almost rehearsed tone, said, "Is Liza expecting us?" I didn't know what to say. I barely even recognized him, but it didn't seem like Liza had mentioned anyone else coming. I looked back toward the kitchen, and there she was, standing with a tight smile on her face, eyes locked with mine, her hands trembling just a little as she wiped them on a towel. "Oh, yes," I said, feeling a little off. "Come on in." They all shuffled in, Liza's family exchanging their usual pleasantries. But this man, the one who had just shown up out of nowhere, took a seat at the table as if he'd been there for years. No one seemed to acknowledge the oddity of it. It was as if he belonged. Liza and I barely exchanged words. Every time I tried to strike up a conversation, she seemed distracted, distant. I kept telling myself it was just the stress of the holiday, but my gut told me something was off. Something had shifted. The air felt thick with tension, but I couldn't understand why. As the evening progressed, I tried to keep a low profile, playing the role of the quiet, polite husband, but I kept glancing at this man. His presence was so off-putting. He was too confident, too at ease in our home. He didn't even seem to notice when I shot him a questioning look, as if he already knew everything about me, everything about us. Finally, the main course was served. The conversation at the table had been light, but a shift happened when we got to dessert. Liza, for the first time that day, looked up from her phone, meeting my gaze. There was something in her eyes that I couldn't quite read. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, but definitely something that I wasn't used to. She turned to me and casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, did you hear? Tom here has been helping me with some of the business stuff lately. He's really been a huge help." Tom. That was his name. My mind raced. Business? What business? She had never mentioned him. Why would she hide this? And why did she seem so uncomfortable when I asked? I could feel the pit in my stomach growing as I tried to understand. The way she said, helping me, felt like it meant more than just business. I wanted to press her on it, but I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to make a scene at the dinner table. The conversation continued, but my thoughts were elsewhere. My gaze kept drifting back to Tom, sitting across from me, smiling at Liza. The way he looked at her was too intimate. It wasn't the look of a colleague, not even the look of a friend. It was a look I recognized from my own past, the kind of look you give someone when you're interested, when you're not just exchanging pleasantries, but sharing something more. I wanted to call it out, but I couldn't find the right moment. And I didn't want to ruin Christmas, not over a suspicion. But then, the conversation took a turn when Carol, Liza's mother, jokingly said, "I guess we should all raise our glasses to the lovely couple. I mean, they're always so good at making this holiday feel special." Tom smiled. Liza did too, but there was something forced in her expression. I caught a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. It was brief, but it was enough. Enough to confirm that whatever was going on wasn't just in my head. I stood up, excusing myself from the table. As I walked past the window, I caught a glimpse of the snow falling softly outside, but it didn't bring me peace. The house felt colder than it had before, like the warmth we'd once shared had been replaced by something much darker. When I returned to the table, I took my seat, trying to gather my thoughts. But that's when I finally asked, "So, Liza, are we all forgetting something? Like, the house? The one that's in my name? And the prenup that you haven't mentioned in ages? The room fell silent. The air, once thick with holiday cheer, was now thick with something else. Fear. Liza's eyes widened, and she choked on her wine. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. But the truth had to come out. And now, there was no turning back. The silence at the table was deafening. My words hung in the air, unspoken thoughts swirling around each person in the room. For a moment, no one moved. Even the soft hum of the refrigerator, which had been a background noise to the entire evening, seemed to vanish. Liza's eyes locked onto mine, but she didn't speak. Her face flushed with the kind of panic I hadn't seen in years, and it made my stomach churn. It was like I had struck a nerve, but I didn't know why. I could feel everyone's gaze shifting between us, wondering if they should intervene or just let this play out. Carol, her mother, nervously cleared her throat, as if trying to defuse the tension, but she only made it worse. Edgar, darling, it's Christmas. Let's not get into the business stuff tonight, all right? The words were meant to be soothing, but they only made the situation worse. I felt my grip on the table tighten as I kept my eyes fixed on Liza. I wasn't going to let this go. She had been hiding something, and I wasn't going to let her make it seem like everything was fine. Oh, I know it's Christmas, Carol. But the thing is, it's hard to ignore certain things when they've been lingering for months. My voice was low but sharp, cutting through the awkwardness. Don't you think it's about time I got some answers, Liza? She looked down, her hands shaking slightly as she fumbled with the wine glass in front of her. It was so unlike her. Liza was always composed, confident, the life of the party. But tonight, she was unraveling right before my eyes. I could see the conflict in her eyes, guilt, fear, shame. It wasn't like her at all. It was as if the person sitting in front of me wasn't the woman I had spent years with. I watched her struggle to find the right words, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But I quickly dismissed the feeling. She had to face what was happening. Tom, who had been unusually quiet up until this point, leaned back in his chair, his expression neutral, almost too neutral. There was something about the way he held himself, the calm demeanor that didn't match the gravity of the situation. He was acting like an observer, not someone who was part of this family gathering. It was as if he knew exactly how to stay out of the line of fire, letting the storm pass around him while still maintaining a position of control. I wanted to confront him, too, but there was something telling me to stay focused on Liza. I didn't know what was going on between them, but I was about to find out. The room was growing colder, and the more I watched Liza, the more I realized how much she had changed, how much she had become someone else. You've been so distant lately, I said, my voice cracking a little as I tried to control my frustration. I can't even remember the last time we had a real conversation. And now this stranger at our dinner table? What is going on, Liza? Her eyes flickered up at me, then quickly darted away. She didn't answer immediately, her lips parting as if she were trying to say something, but couldn't. It was as if the truth was locked behind a door she didn't want to open. I'm just trying to make everything work, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. You wouldn't understand. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I wanted to scream at her, demand more, but I held back. I needed to know the truth, and I wasn't going to let her deflect. What do you mean? Make everything work. Liza, what's going on? Why is he here? She looked up at me with wide, desperate eyes, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was trying to come up with a way to explain herself, to give me something that would make sense of everything. But I knew it wouldn't. Not anymore. Liza took a deep breath, gathering herself. He's been helping me with some projects. Some personal stuff. She said it so casually, like it was something that made perfect sense, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. It's nothing like you're thinking. I leaned forward, my hands resting on the edge of the table. Nothing like I'm thinking? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Liza, stop lying. I know you better than this. If it was just personal stuff, why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep it a secret? There was a long pause as she avoided my gaze. I could see the words she wanted to say swirling in her head, but she wasn't ready to say them. Tom, still sitting across from us, finally broke his silence. Maybe it's time for Edgar to understand what's been going on. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as if he knew exactly what I was about to hear. I turned to him, the anger rising in my chest. What do you mean, Tom? His expression remained unchanged. You should know, Edgar, he said, his voice cool, that sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes, relationships change, and what you think is real isn't always what's really happening. His words felt like a punch to the gut, but I didn't react. Not yet. I wasn't going to let him bait me into a fight. Not when I was so close to understanding everything. Liza's face went pale. I could see the blood drain from her cheeks, and in that moment, I realized how deep this went. She had been hiding more than just a few phone calls or casual meetings. She had been keeping an entire part of her life away from me. A part of her life that now included Tom. A part of her life I wasn't even allowed to know about. The room felt suffocating. The holiday cheer, the lights, the warmth, it all felt like a distant memory now. I looked around the table, noticing the way everyone avoided eye contact, the way they shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Liza's family knew. They knew what was going on, and they had been complicit in keeping it a secret. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. This Christmas dinner was the beginning of the end. The beginning of uncovering everything that had been hidden from me. And I wasn't going to stop until I knew the truth. The air in the room had turned icy. The sounds of Christmas music playing softly in the background suddenly felt distant, irrelevant, as if the world outside our house had ceased to exist. My mind raced. I couldn't believe what was happening. This wasn't just a holiday dinner anymore. It had become a scene from a nightmare that I could never have imagined in my worst moments. And all I wanted now was answers, no matter how painful they were. I looked at Liza, her face pale, her lips trembling ever so slightly. It was clear that she wasn't going to say anything more on her own. She was cornered. It wasn't just about hiding things anymore. It was about maintaining the illusion that everything was still normal, that we were still the perfect couple everyone believed we were. But I wasn't buying it anymore. The pieces were starting to come together in my mind, the pieces that I had been too blind to see for so long. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the excuses that no longer made sense. Tom wasn't just a business associate or a close friend. He was more, much more. I couldn't keep pretending, not when everything I had built my life around was starting to crumble. I leaned forward, feeling the heat of my anger rise in my chest. Liza, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. How long has this been going on? And don't tell me it's just a friendship. You and I both know it's not. So stop lying to me. For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that felt heavy and suffocating. Liza shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but she didn't answer me. Her eyes were darting around the table, as if searching for something, anything, to avoid facing me, to avoid facing the truth. I felt my patience begin to wear thin. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I wasn't going to let her drag this out any further. You've been keeping this from me for months. You've lied, and now you're sitting here pretending like everything's fine. I looked at Tom. He hadn't moved an inch, his expression still unreadable. And you've been part of this, haven't you? What's your role in all of this? Tom's calm demeanor didn't falter. He glanced at Liza, as if waiting for her to say something, to react. But she didn't. She was paralyzed. It was as if the truth had knocked the wind out of her, and she didn't know how to recover from it. Then, finally, Tom spoke again, his voice cold and measured. You need to understand, Edgar. Relationships evolve. People change. What you thought you had, what you thought was real, isn't always the case. You've been living in a bubble, and now it's popped. His words hit me harder than I expected. It was like a punch to the gut, the reality of the situation sinking in with painful clarity. Everything I thought I knew about Liza, about us, was false. It was all an illusion, a carefully constructed lie that had been built over the years. And now, the walls were coming down, piece by piece. Liza finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like an eternity. There was no more hesitation. The guilt was written all over her face. She had no more excuses left. Edgar, she whispered, her voice barely audible, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to make you understand. I shook my head, the words tumbling out before I could stop myself. You didn't know how to tell me? How long were you planning on keeping this from me, Liza? How long were you going to pretend that nothing was wrong? She didn't respond, her eyes welling up with tears. But I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her, not anymore. This wasn't about my feelings anymore. It was about the betrayal, the years of deception. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had trusted with my life, had been lying to me all along. The tension in the room was palpable. I could feel it in my bones. Every person sitting at that table knew exactly what was happening, but none of them were brave enough to speak up. Carol, Liza's mother, was staring at her plate, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if praying for the situation to blow over. Kyle, her brother, was staring at me, his expression unreadable, as if he was trying to figure out how much longer this would last before things got out of hand. And Tom, he was calm, too calm. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke, it was as if he had been expecting this moment. He had been waiting for me to figure it out. I turned back to Liza, feeling the anger rise in my chest once again. So what now? You think this is just going to go away? You think I'm just going to sit here and pretend like everything's fine while you and Tom have been hiding this from me? My voice cracked with frustration, but I didn't care. How long has it been, Liza? How long have you been seeing him? Liza's lip trembled. She didn't answer right away. But when she did, her voice barely above a whisper, the words cut through the silence like a knife. It started before Christmas last year. That was it. The confession I had been waiting for. The confirmation of everything I had feared. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. It wasn't something that could be explained away. It was a full-on affair, and it had been going on for far longer than I had known. I sat back in my chair, stunned. My mind was spinning, the weight of the truth crashing down on me. I could feel my chest tightening, like I was suffocating. The Christmas lights that twinkled around the room now felt like mockery. Everything felt like a cruel joke. And then, to my surprise, Tom spoke again. You've had your chance, Edgar. You had the opportunity to be the man Liza needed. But you were too caught up in your own world, too busy with your own life. That's why we're here now. He looked at Liza, a subtle smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. We found something real, something you couldn't give her. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. They echoed in my head, repeating over and over again, until I thought I might go mad. He was right. I had been blind. I had let my life become a routine, a comfortable existence where I assumed everything would stay the same. But I was wrong. I had underestimated the power of change. And now, I was left standing in the ruins of what had been my life. As the room fell into silence once again, I realized something. This wasn't just about Liza. This was about me, too. About the man I had become. The man who had let everything slip through his fingers. And now, I had to face the consequences of my own inaction. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I couldn't breathe. The words Tom had just spoken were still echoing in my mind, over and over again. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid, every truth that had been hidden for so long. I stared at Liza, still sitting across from me, her face pale and drained, as though she had given up all pretense. The tears she had been holding back finally started to spill down her cheeks. But it wasn't the sight of her crying that broke me. It was the fact that she was crying because she got caught, not because she regretted any of it. I felt a wave of disgust rise within me. All these years, I had believed in us, in her. We'd built a life together, and I thought it meant something. I thought we were happy. But now, as I looked at her, I realized that maybe she had never been truly mine. Maybe I had always been the second choice, the safety net. And Tom, he was always there, quietly waiting in the wings, watching as I played the fool. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. The tension in the room escalated instantly, and everyone fell silent, unsure of what I might do next. My thoughts were a jumble, a mess of anger and hurt, but most of all, I was ashamed. Not just of her betrayal, but of my own. My failure to see the signs, my refusal to face what had been right in front of me. For years, I had lived in a comfortable, stagnant bubble, refusing to acknowledge the cracks in our relationship. Liza had always been my constant, the one I could rely on. And now, here she was, a stranger in front of me, a person I couldn't recognize anymore. I turned to Tom, the man who had made this all possible. He was still sitting there, calm and collected, like this was some kind of twisted game. His eyes never left mine, his posture never shifting. You really think you've won, don't you? I said, my voice low but firm, almost dangerous. Tom smiled, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It was a knowing grin, the kind you see on someone who's been plotting for far too long. I don't think I've won, Edgar, he replied, his tone even and controlled. This isn't a game. It's about truth. It's about moving on from a place that was holding both of us back. You're not the man Liza needs anymore. She needs someone who can give her the attention, the passion that you stopped providing a long time ago. The words stung, but they were the truth. I couldn't deny that something had changed between Liza and me. The spark we once had was long gone, buried beneath routine and silence. But hearing it from him, hearing it laid out so coldly, made it feel like a betrayal I couldn't come back from. He was right, in a way. Liza had outgrown me. She had moved on long before I had ever realized it. I could feel the anger building in my chest. You really think you can just waltz in here, sit at my table, and tell me that you've done me a favor? I said, my voice rising. You think you can take my life, my wife, and call it moving on? You don't know anything about what we've built together, what I have sacrificed. Tom didn't flinch. He was unfazed by my outburst. You never asked her how she felt? Edgar, he said, his voice calm, like he was speaking to a child. You were too busy with your own world. You were too comfortable to notice what was slipping away right in front of you. I clenched my fists, trying to contain the fury that was threatening to spill over. But before I could say anything else, Liza finally spoke. Her voice was weak, almost pleading, but there was no going back now. Edgar, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I didn't know how to tell you. I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, the sound feeling foreign to me. You never wanted to hurt me? I repeated, incredulity in my voice. Then why the lies? Why keep this secret for so long? Why drag me through months of doubts when you knew exactly what was happening? Her silence was all the answer I needed. There was no remorse in her eyes, no apology that could undo the damage. She had crossed a line, and there was no way back. Tom watched us silently, as if waiting for the inevitable. The tension between me and Liza was thick, suffocating. I could barely look at her now. The woman I had loved had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. I turned away from her, the urge to leave overwhelming. I couldn't sit at that table anymore. Couldn't pretend that everything was normal. I needed to get out, to escape this suffocating nightmare that had once been my life. But before I could walk away, Liza's voice stopped me. Please, don't leave like this, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Edgar, I know I've made a huge mistake, but we can fix this. We can work through it. I still love you. I froze. The words felt like they were coming from someone else, like they weren't even meant for me. I turned to face her again, looking into her eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw the truth. The love I thought was there, it was gone. It had faded long before tonight. What she was offering me now wasn't love. It was guilt. It was desperation. I looked at her one last time, and then at Tom, who still had that smug, self-satisfied look on his face. You two can have each other, I said quietly, my voice steady but filled with finality. But you've lost me. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. The sound of the door closing behind me felt like the final chapter of a story that had already ended long before I had the courage to face it. The cold air hit me the moment I stepped outside. I took a deep breath, the chill biting at my skin, but I didn't feel the cold. Not anymore. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but one thing was clear, everything had changed. And there was no turning back now. The door closed with a thud behind me, and for a brief moment, I stood there on the cold porch, trying to make sense of everything. The night felt surreal, as if I had stepped into a parallel world where nothing was as it seemed. The lights from the Christmas tree shimmered faintly through the window, but it felt miles away, a memory of something that had already been lost. The crisp night air bit at my skin, but it was almost a relief. It was the first time in hours that I felt like I could breathe again, like I wasn't suffocating under the weight of their lies. But the peace didn't last. As I stood there, hands shoved deep in my coat pockets, the reality of it all started to hit me. Liza, Tom, the betrayal, the house, the years of trust, now completely shattered. I thought back to all the moments when I'd noticed something was off, when I'd brushed it aside, thinking it was just a phase or nothing at all. How could I have been so blind? The answer was simple. I had trusted her too much. I had trusted us too much. The sound of the door opening behind me brought me back to the present. I turned to see Liza standing in the doorway, her face a mask of regret and guilt. She took a step forward, her voice trembling as she called my name. Edgar, please don't do this. Don't leave me like this. Her words were laced with desperation, but I wasn't sure what she was really asking for. Was she asking for forgiveness? Was she asking for me to stay, to somehow ignore everything that had just happened? I didn't answer. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. She stepped closer, her eyes full of tears, but I could feel myself shutting down, retreating inside my mind, distancing myself from the woman who had just torn apart everything I thought I knew. I never meant for you to find out like this, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to fix what had happened. But there was no fixing it now, was there? Not after everything that had been exposed. Not after Tom had shown up uninvited, sitting there with the same casual arrogance he had worn throughout the evening. It was clear now that he was part of the plan, part of the narrative Liza had built while keeping me in the dark. I could hear his voice echoing in my head. This isn't a game. It's about truth. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to face the fact that everything I had built, my trust, my love, my belief in her, had been a lie. The foundation of my entire life had been eroded, and I felt like I was drowning in the wreckage. Liza reached out, her hand hovering in the air, unsure whether to touch me or not. She didn't understand. She didn't realize that this wasn't about the affair itself anymore. It was about everything that had led up to it. The lies, the secrets, the years of me pretending that everything was fine while I watched her slip away from me, piece by piece. Edgar, please, she pleaded, her voice barely audible. I love you. I don't want to lose you. The words were empty now, hollow. They had lost their meaning. In the past, those words would have meant the world to me. But now, they felt like nothing more than an apology that would never be enough. I shook my head, turning away from her. I couldn't look at her anymore. Not after everything. You don't love me, Liza. Not in the way you should. Not the way I thought you did. Her face crumpled as I said it. She took another step toward me, but I couldn't face her. The hurt was too much. You don't understand, she said again, almost pleading. But this time, her words had no power over me. They only reminded me of the years of trust one had wasted. For a moment, I considered walking back inside. I considered sitting down at the table and talking through everything, seeing if there was any way to salvage what had been lost. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was too late. There was no going back. With every second that passed, the distance between us grew wider. I could feel the finality of it, like a door slamming shut, and I realized that I had already left her behind. Not physically, but emotionally. I had already checked out. And in that moment, it hit me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. Tired of being the one who didn't see the truth. Tired of being the fool in this story. I turned around, not looking at her again, and began walking down the porch steps. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to get away, to clear my head. The cold air was a shock to my system, but it helped me focus. It reminded me that I was still alive, still able to think for myself, still capable of finding my way out of this mess. Behind me, I could hear her voice once more, calling out my name, but this time, I didn't answer. I kept walking, away from the house, away from the life I had known for so long, away from the woman I had once loved. The city streets stretched out before me, empty and silent, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice again. It wasn't a choice I ever thought I'd have to make, but it was a choice nonetheless. A choice to move on, to leave the past behind, and to rebuild my life. This time, without her. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Not to her. Not to that house. Not to the lie I had been living. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was free. I walked aimlessly through the city streets, my steps heavy, my mind racing. The world around me seemed so distant, as though I was moving through a fog. The Christmas lights that decorated the buildings flickered in the distance, but they felt so out of place. It was supposed to be a time of joy, of family, of togetherness. But for me, it was nothing but a reminder of how everything had shattered in a matter of hours. The weight of the events was still sinking in. Liza's face, Tom's smug expression, the realization that everything I had believed in was a lie. It all hit me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, to shout at the world for the cruel trick it had played on me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no one to blame but myself. How had I missed it? How had I let it go on for so long? The guilt gnawed at me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just my fault. As I walked, the cold wind bit at my skin, but I barely noticed it. My mind was numb, but the ache in my chest refused to subside. I had spent years building a life with Liza, only to have it all crumble in front of me. The woman I had loved, who had promised me forever, was now nothing more than a stranger. And Tom, he wasn't just an outsider. He had been there all along, waiting in the shadows, playing his part in a game that I had never even realized was being played. I walked past a quiet park, the benches empty, the snow covering the ground in a thick, pristine layer. It should have been peaceful, but all I could think about was the warmth of the house I had left behind. The warmth that had never been real. The cold truth about Liza and Tom was the only thing that lingered in my mind. I thought about calling someone, anyone, just to hear a familiar voice, to remind myself that I wasn't completely alone. But I couldn't bring myself to reach out. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want anyone to tell me it would be okay, because I knew it wouldn't be. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, half expecting to see a message from Liza. But it wasn't her. It was a notification from the bank. I opened it absent-mindedly, still half-dazed, but when I saw the numbers on the screen, I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart skipped a beat as the reality of it all sank in deeper. The balance in my account had dropped significantly. I quickly checked the transaction history. There were multiple withdrawals, all recent, all from the same account. Liza's account, the one I had trusted her with. The pieces fell into place faster than I could process them. Liza hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had been taking money from our account, hiding it from me. I'd always been the one managing the finances, but somehow, she'd managed to take more than I realized. And now, here it was, proof of her secret life. Not just with Tom, but in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. I felt my blood run cold. The betrayal stung in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that she had been planning this for longer than I had known. She had taken something I had worked so hard to build, and now, it was all slipping through my fingers. I looked up, realizing I had wandered into a part of the city I didn't recognize. The lights were dimmer here, the streets quieter. I found myself walking faster, the anger in me building with every step. I couldn't go back to that house, not after everything. But I also knew I couldn't just run away and pretend like nothing had happened. I had to confront this, had to face the mess she had left behind. The snow crunched beneath my feet as I walked, but there was no comfort in the sound. My mind was racing, each thought more chaotic than the last. I thought back to all the times I had tried to talk to Liza, to reach out to her when I knew something was wrong. And each time, she had pushed me away, made me feel like I was imagining things. She'd always been good at convincing me that everything was fine, that I was just overthinking. But now it was clear. She had been lying to me from the start. As I walked, I found myself asking the same questions over and over again. How did I miss this? Why didn't I see the signs? Was I so blinded by my own complacency that I couldn't see the truth staring me in the face? I needed answers, but I wasn't sure where to turn for them. I couldn't go back to Liza, not after everything she had done. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not after everything she had taken from me. I walked for what felt like hours, the city around me becoming a blur, until I found myself standing outside a small bar. I hadn't planned on stopping, but something about the dim lights and the quiet, unassuming entrance made me pause. Maybe it was the desire to be somewhere, anywhere, away from the weight of everything at home. Maybe it was just the need to escape my own thoughts for a while. I walked inside, the warmth of the bar hitting me immediately. I scanned the room, my eyes settling on the empty stools at the bar. The bartender, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, nodded at me as I approached. I ordered a drink, trying to calm my shaking hands, and took a seat, feeling the tension in my body start to loosen just slightly. But even as I sat there, the ache in my chest didn't go away. Liza, Tom, the betrayal, the money, it was all still there, gnawing at me. And as I sipped my drink, I realized something. No matter how far I walked, no matter how many drinks I had, nothing was going to change what had happened. I couldn't outrun it. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and thought about the next step. I wasn't sure what it was yet, but I knew I had to face this head-on. The truth had come crashing down around me, and now, it was time to pick up the pieces. As the bartender slid the drink in front of me, I took a long, slow sip, trying to steady my nerves. The amber liquid burned down my throat, but it didn't do anything to numb the pain, the anger, or the betrayal that had already seeped so deeply into my bones. The weight of everything, the lies, the deceit, the years I had wasted, hung over me like a storm cloud, and I didn't know how to escape it. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely lost. I could still hear Liza's voice in my head, the desperation in her words, the pleading. But now, they meant nothing to me. Nothing she could say would make this right. I couldn't go back to that house, to her, to the life we'd shared. Every time I thought about walking back into that place, I could feel the walls closing in again, suffocating me. And then there was Tom. I could feel my jaw tighten at the thought of him. The man who had not only stolen my wife, but had done so with such cold calculation. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. My thoughts felt fragmented, chaotic, but one thing kept repeating itself. I need to make them pay. Not just for what they had done to me, but for the years I'd spent being blind to the truth. For the trust one had given, the loyalty I had shown. I had been a fool, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not now. Not ever. I took another drink, my mind still racing. Every time I thought I had a clear thought, another one would come rushing in. My heart pounded in my chest, my blood boiling as I thought about how Liza had managed to keep this from me for so long. I could picture her, the way she had acted around me for months, always pretending everything was fine. It had been a game to her, and to Tom, a game that they had both played well, each taking their turn while I was left in the dark. But now I was done. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I wasn't going to sit around, wondering why or how or what could have been. It was time to take action. I looked up at the bartender, who was wiping down the counter with a rag, and for a moment, I considered telling him everything. About the betrayal, the lies, the woman I had loved. But I stopped myself. This wasn't something I could talk about with a stranger. This wasn't something that could be fixed by talking, by explaining. This was personal. Too personal. I stood up from the bar, suddenly feeling a rush of clarity. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside. It felt like a jolt of reality, a slap in the face that brought me back to the moment. I wasn't sure what my next move was, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen for a moment before I unlocked it. I could feel my pulse quicken as I opened the messaging app. Liza's name was at the top of my contacts list, and for a moment, I hesitated. The thought of texting her, of confronting her again, made my stomach twist. But no, I wasn't going to waste my energy on her anymore. Instead, I scrolled down to Tom's name. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, a response, a reason, some sort of justification for everything they had done, but I knew I needed to say something. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before I started typing. You think you've won, Tom? You think you can just walk in and take what's mine? You've made a mistake, and you'll regret it. I paused before hitting send, the words sitting on the screen, waiting. For a second, I wondered if I should just delete the message, walk away, forget about it all. But I couldn't. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not anymore. With a quick tap, I sent the message. My heart hammered in my chest, but there was no turning back now. I wasn't just reacting out of hurt anymore. This was something more. It was a promise. A promise that I would make them pay for what they had done. I wasn't going to just let it go. I shoved my phone back in my pocket, the adrenaline surging through me. I didn't know what Tom would say, or if he would even reply, but that didn't matter. I had taken the first step. I had made my move. And now, everything was in motion. I began walking again, the streets blurring around me as I tried to think through the next steps. I could already hear Liza's voice in my head again, but this time, it didn't stop me. This time, I wasn't going to let her have the last word. I wasn't going to let her try to fix this, to make me believe that everything could go back to normal. What had happened tonight wasn't just a betrayal. It was a destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage. And I wasn't going to let that go. I didn't know how far I was willing to go, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them win. The night stretched on, and I kept walking. The city was vast, but it felt smaller somehow. Each step I took felt like a step away from everything that had been, and towards something else, something unknown. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a small spark of something other than anger, a sense of control. For once, I was taking my life back. And I wasn't going to stop until I made them regret what they had done to me. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I didn't hear from Tom, and frankly, I wasn't sure what I wanted from him anyway. I had said my piece, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had taken control. The anger, the betrayal, all of it had been a weight on my shoulders for so long. But now, as the days passed, I could feel it starting to lift. I didn't go back to the house. I couldn't. It felt like a different life now. A life that was no longer mine. A chapter 1 needed to close. Instead, I found a small apartment in a quieter part of the city. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place with bare walls and simple furniture, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own space. A place where I could breathe again, where I could rebuild from the rubble of the life I had known. I spent my days focusing on myself, taking care of what had been neglected for too long. I took long walks in the park, started working out again, something I hadn't done in years. Slowly but surely, the pieces of my life that had been broken began to fall into place. I wasn't the man I had been before all of this, but in a strange way, that wasn't a bad thing. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger. And then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Liza. My heart dropped, but I answered, curious and apprehensive all at once. Edgar. Her voice was softer than I had remembered. I wanted to say that I'm sorry. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for, but I just needed you to know that. You were everything to me, and I destroyed that. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't say anything for a moment. I could feel the weight of her words, but I also felt something else, relief. Relief because I had already let go of the anger. I had already let go of the need for vengeance. What had happened was in the past, and I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the same person who would have begged her to come back. I appreciate that, Liza, I said quietly, my voice steady. But I'm not the same person I was, either. I've moved on. And I think you have, too. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when she spoke again, it was softer, less desperate. I understand. I really do. I just wanted to thank you for everything. I'll always care about you, Edgar. But I know you're right. We're different people now. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. There was no more anger, no more bitterness, no more resentment. I had moved on, and she had, too. We were two different people, but in a way, we had both grown from the experience. The relationship that had once defined me had come to an end, but in its place was something new. I hung up the phone, staring out the window of my small apartment. The city stretched out before me, vast and filled with possibilities. And for the first time in so long, I felt free. Not just from Liza and the betrayal, but from the version of myself that had allowed it to happen. I was free to move forward. The next few months flew by. I found a new job, met new people, and slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had learned to trust again, not in others, but in myself. I had learned that it was okay to be vulnerable, but that I was also capable of standing on my own 2 feet, no matter how many times I had been knocked down. And one evening, as I sat at a coffee shop reading a book, I met someone new. Her name was Claire, and she had a smile that made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. We talked for hours, and by the time I walked her to her car, I knew something had changed in me. It wasn't that I was ready to rush into anything, but for the first time since all of this started, I felt like I could. I wasn't looking for another perfect relationship. I wasn't searching for someone to fix me or make me forget the past. I just wanted to take it slow, to build something real, something grounded in mutual respect and trust. As I lay in bed that night, thinking about everything that had happened and where I was now, I couldn't help but smile. I had survived. I had endured the worst, and in the end, it had made me stronger. For the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. I was ready for whatever came next. The past was behind me, and I was free to move forward. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. A new beginning, free from the shadows of the past. A chance to rewrite my story, one that was truly my own.